All right, the latest project, and it's a big project, both in size of locomotive and in the amount of work that needed to be done. This is an MTH 4664 Z6 Challenger. This is a Great Northern. I got this project almost a year ago. It did not have any boards. It did not have a harness. It did not have a motor. It didn't have the dog bone drive shaft, but it had the wrong wheels, which I found out later. It was not labeled as a scale wheel. This is a scale wheel. The scale wheel has a very, very small flange. And when you put it on the rails, that small flange likes to derail. I could have bought a new motor block from MTH, but it was really expensive. And the locomotive was already pretty expensive, and I didn't want to spend the money. So I looked for an alternative. My alternative are Lionel 2035 wheels. They have the same diameter, and they have a nice big flange on the back. They're not as detailed, but they're still pretty cool. So to make a 235 wheel work, I had to bore the axle hole with a drill bit, not difficult to do, to make sure it was the same size as the MTH wheels. I had to use 2035 shoulder bolts to hold all of the connections on, because MTH are a different thread than a 235. 235 wheels came flat on the back or geared. So I bought enough of the flat backed wheels that I had them for both sides of the locomotive. And then they had the blind centers. The blind centers have this little dip in the center where Lionel used to connect all their drive rods. If you put a little tiny 440 washer over that, then you can use the shoulder bolts and everything works great. So we put this whole thing together. I had to change the wheels on the front truck. I actually had an extra MTH front truck, so I had the right wheels. The drive wheels have the blind center and then the flanged rear and front wheels on MTH axles. All of this worked pretty well. On the back, MTH has this thing where they have notches cut right where the shoulder bolt goes, so that the eccentric drive doesn't spin. So I took a Dremel and carved my little cross shape in. You can see on this wheel, I needed to make that little X. So I made that with a little Dremel and a router bit, so that all my eccentric rod hooked up the way it was supposed to, and it worked great. I did the same thing on the rear. I bought this little motor. MTH sells the motor. It's like $45. I found out what it was and found one on an electronic website. I think I got it for $4. I had this extra dog bone weight, and I had the drive shaft from another project. On the rear truck, same thing. I went through my parts bin and I found wheels that were very similar in size to the MTH. Not exact, but similar, and they had flanges on them. Right now, I don't have all the wiring done. I put a bridge rectifier on it. My red and black inner and outer rails go to the inside terminals. Outside terminals are just temporarily wired to the back. The headlight up front is temporarily wired in. Everything will get done in a little bit. But when this whole thing is together, it had to turn. And we get this really nice running driving MTH Z6 Challenger. I think I have $25 in buying the correct 235 wheels to make it work. I've probably got another 10 or 11 bucks in the motor and some other little things. But we're going to finish putting all the wiring in, put the shell on top, and see if we can get this thing to run at a fraction of the cost.